and I wish I would have made the print bigger on the thing I'm going to need. Bear with me, I'm not fond of public speaking, and that always is an eye-opener for a lot of people because I play music sometimes in front of thousands of people. But at those times, I'm just one drummer way in the back, and I always figure nobody's looking at me. And then when I do art, I have an art career too, and when I do slide talks, everybody's looking that way, and the slides are being shown, and I'm way back here. So anyway, I think maybe this building is the only place where it's not rare that two native Napans are speaking at the same time, even on the same subject basically. But like Mike, I'm a native Napan, and I was asked to come here and speak about my experiences with music leading up to the band Amber Whine's performances and experiences at the venerable, then newly reopening Dream Bowl. And it really, as far as the Dream Bowl is concerned, it really does begin with my childhood memories. Because growing up in Napa, when we were heading out of town, because my grandparents lived in Vallejo, like many Napans kind of had that experience, we would always pass the one and only lone structure off to the left in the totally undeveloped, all those acres. There was no buildings, nothing, just this big music temple. And to me, it was a mysterious magic temple where even when I was little, it was still active. So even when at 5 or 6, I knew it was a music place. Didn't know much about it other than that. And it always had a big marquee outside, like a movie theater thing. And the one I remember, for some reason that sticks out in my mind, was Blackjack Wayne. I believe it said Blackjack Wayne and the Gamblers, but Mike and me couldn't establish that that would be a fact. But my childhood memory remembers it that way. And then a few deck of cards, of course, Blackjack was a part of that thing. So for me, it was like a magical siren call from far away, an exciting, unknown world of music for my imagination, because from my earliest memories, I wanted to be a musician and an artist. Where that came from, I don't know. But when I was in kindergarten, I used to put my pictures up on the wall, made me feel like a little rock star. And so when we passed the Dream Bowl, it just ignited my imagination even more. Which further happened because my parents used to talk about it. So a story that Mike asked me to include, because I had it in here and took it out, so I'm going to give a very short version of it because it could be a whole talk by itself. But at 6 years old, I was visiting my aunt down in LA because we were going to be there for the first year of the opening of Disneyland, which we were, so you know I'm old. And we were going, and we would visit my aunt all the time. So I did something you shouldn't do. We were down at the beach because they lived right on the beach. I took it upon myself as a 6-year-old to walk up the street, and I saw this really interesting building, and I peeked inside, and there were artists that were working on these huge paintings that I didn't even know artists did. And I went in there, and I was mesmerized, and they didn't kick me out. They were very welcoming to me, answered all my questions, and at the same time, which took a lot of explaining later, because I didn't have permission to go do this, one of the artists handed me a pair of bongo drums. So I call it the lightning bolt day, just because both careers were cemented in my psyche as, hey, it's awesome, I want to do this. So I don't know if it's a cool thing or a sort of sad thing that a 6 or 7-year-old determined how my whole life was going to be. But that is what happened. And so when I was 6, I would be walking around my house with a little French beret on and hitting bongo drums. And I never had a word from my parents of any discouragement or irritation. So I'm just going to say shout out. What amazing mom and dad. Because they walk the talk about telling us to do what we love to do, make that what we do. So the mystery and magic surrounding the Dream Bowl was further ignited by my family and their friends always talking about people being there like Johnny Cash. And my dad used to say, well, I met Johnny Cash twice because they played there 3 times. And I'm not kidding, I did not believe my dad until Mike came out with his book. because I grew up in this house with a lot of humor and teasing, and good teasing, not bad. And I thought my dad was making this up, just like I used to tell my kids, when I was in the Olympics and stuff like that. So I used to do the same thing, except this was for real. So it was there. But by the time I was a preteen, getting into music and bands of my own, it had closed and had become like the ruins from a magical time long gone. My foray into playing drum set in the band was at 13. I was just like a little puppy band like people do. But my imagination was then driven by some of the groups that Mike just talked about that was pre-Beatles. So things like the Bo Brummels. People might not even remember these bands, but they were big at the time. The Everly Brothers, the Beach Boys, of course people remember. Jan and Dean, a whole bunch of bands. But with the beginning of my own first what I call a real band at 15, was a band called Natural Selection. And there were hardly any other teen bands even around that were creating and playing original music, peppered by a few covers, so we got to play all the time. I mean, we were literally playing all the time. And somehow it escaped us. We didn't realize that we were these little puppies. I mean, we thought we were, I don't know how you guys were teenagers. I thought I was kind of all grown up. Then by just a coincidence of when I was born, and almost simultaneously the British invasion happened, followed by the psychedelic music scene in San Francisco. And all changed music locally in the Bay Area, internationally, etc. Suddenly the Bay Area seemed like ground zero. So we dressed in the same mod clothes those bands did. We had long hair and we played all around. So this is hilarious, but it's the truth. So we were treated like the rock stars that we were emulating when we'd go play at the schools and stuff like that. People would wait outside and scream. I had a girl that I went out with later when I was in high school that saved a candy bar wrapper apparently threw on the ground. Sorry about the littering. At 15, Natural Selection, we were too young to get to play at some of the shows we were being asked to because we weren't in the musicians unit, and at that time you couldn't even play at school unless you were. So at 15 and a half, musicians union granted us special permission to be able to play and be in the union. So all of a sudden, we began to have opportunities to open up for some of the best bands in the area, like Quicksilver Messenger Service. Some of you will remember them. Another band you might not remember, the Mojo Men. A band called Clover, which is actually Huey Lewis's first band. The Bronze Hawk and Norton Buffalo and a whole bunch more. And they were all about 10, 15 years older than us. And I remember we thought they were old. I'm not kidding, we thought, wow, we're playing with these old people, So that would have made them about 25, maybe 28. We literally did. I remember meeting a bass player once who was a local guy, and when he told me he was 28, my jaw dropped. I thought, oh my God, this guy is old. Maybe too old to be playing music. I didn't know. So the Bay Area music scene was exploding, and suddenly famous venues like the Fillmore, the Alamo Ballroom, Maritime Hall, and more were developing all over the San Francisco Bay. And as my earlier puppy band faded, I helped form the band Amber Whine. And I'm saying we were older than, but lots of laughs. We were about 17 and a half. Now we for sure thought we were grown up, and I really sincerely remember that. I thought that I just thought that we were there. Amber Whine was made with Greg Miller, who sadly has passed away, Johnny Kramer, Carl Timmer, and me. And then for a really short while, Courtney Myers, which a lot of you are familiar with, was in the band. We quickly began to open up for legendary bands all over, like Sly and the Family Stone, Avalia's Blue Rock Springs, and other well-known bands around the North Bay. But then along came the reopening of the legendary Dreamville. And we were asked, which was just wonderful to us, we were asked to come and do an audition. And at that time, I didn't realize we were the only band from the Napa Valley that was asked, but we did get booked for lots of shows. We opened 2 shows for the Grateful Dead, 2 shows for the Sons of Champlin, and we had other shows that were lined up, but the band was a short-lived venue, and it closed for good before we got to do those performances. So I was asked to talk about a couple of those experiences. So one of them that I want to talk about was performing with the Grateful Dead. But it would all begin with auditions. Amber Whine was asked to come down to the Dream Bowl and audition for the upcoming shows, which we knew we were excited about, and they were going to be happening. And so there was 2 days where all these semi-famous bands were there because they were playing as openers throughout the Bay Area, and we kind of knew who they were because we were playing in places too. And you get to know each other. So you're in this group, in this room with a whole bunch of people that are kind of your friends and some that aren't your friends. Again, almost all of them were older than us. And again, we thought we were all grown up, but we obviously were not. So when we opened for the Grateful Dead, due to the ridiculous and early long sound checks and time, we got to spend a whole lot of time in the green room with the Grateful Dead. Nowadays, it's not like that. So when I was fortunate enough to play at Bottle Rock 3 different years, and we had to be there at 8:30 in the morning for sound check. We were playing at 3. And bands like Primus and all these other bands, they had a different band come and do their sound check. They're back in the hotel lounging around. And they have roadies and the whole thing, you know, and then we're this band that has none of that stuff. So we had to do our sound check. And, but, you know, it was wonderful, and it was also wonderful there. So the legendary Jerry Garcia, Bob Weir, Rob McKiernan, who many know as Big Ben, Phil Lesh, Bill Kreutzmann, and the newly added Mickey Hart were the band. So being with your heroes is really rewarding. And Jerry Garcia had his latest find with him, which was a Martin acoustic guitar from the 1800s. And I remember being like totally shocked because I didn't even know, you know, they made Martins in the 1800s. Actually, might not have known that they made guitars in the 1800s. But I did. He was playing that thing the whole time we talked, and we're talking hours. And what an entertaining, awesome human being. So all this stuff about, which he would be embarrassed, I'm sure, about him being a legend and all that. A lot of it's based in reality. He was an entertaining human being. I mean, he talked the whole time, was talking about memories, talking about things they did, and they were really a relatively new band too. You don't think of it like that, but they were the Warlocks for a while, and I think they became Grateful Dead about 65, so this wasn't too far after they began. The amazing thing is they treated us wonderfully like fellow musicians. They didn't treat us like, what are these little puppies doing in here? They were wonderful, and one of the memories was that Phil Lesh's parents, the bass player, were in the pre-stage area, because supposedly they lived in the eastern hills of Napa. I'm wondering, does that mean that Phil Lesh went to school here? I don't know. But they looked exactly, and I mean exactly, like the couple from the Grand Wood Painting American God. The only thing that they weren't doing was holding a pitchfork. I mean, they were dressed like them, they looked like them, and because I was an art major, I thought the couple was there. And then Phil Lesh said, that's my parents. And by the way, I don't have this written here, but one of the things they were doing the whole time that Father was on, every time they played, he was like going Afuya, and I was thinking, dude, read the room. I mean, another thing was that they had actual cannons on stage. I mean, real cannons, 2 of them. And for some of you who ever saw them in the early days, when they would do the song Love Light, when the part would go da ba 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 da 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 da, boom, they would fire off these cannons, and they would do it a lot because that song is long, as every Grateful Dead song is, by the way. And at the end of the second night, everybody noticed there was smoke coming up from the floor. This was before Scott Stetson was a fireman. Because what they did is they just didn't want to be seen that, so they threw 2 rugs over, which that's got to make it worse if there's something burning. But they did that. Another thing was the Grateful Dead are actually responsible for modern sound at shows. They used to, like even the Beatles in '65, they were playing over the loudspeaker system in Candlestick. So they invented this thing called the Wall of Sound, and it really was as huge if you've ever seen it, from floor to ceiling. And the ceiling is pretty tall in the Dream Bowl. They had this Wall of Sound, and as we were watching the show, we're sitting in the front row, and Carl Altamira, our bass player, looked up and goes, hey, they got my amp up there. And to this day, I don't know how you would have noticed that because a Fender Bassman looks the same. There's not different colors. So they had about 20 or 25 of those stacked up with the little red lights on. How he knew which one was his, I have no idea. Something like how a Papa Penguin or Mother Penguin knows the sound they're up. I don't know. But he wasn't happy and he couldn't do anything about it. Another thing that happened there was the roadies, because they had double drummers, on the end of the second night, their roadies dumped all of their drumsticks into my stuff. So I had drumsticks for over 2 years. I never had to buy another drumstick. And I kept having people saying, aren't you going to collect them? And I go, no, I'm going to use them. You know, maybe now I wish I would have collected them. But, you know. Opening for the Sons of Champlin was like a whole different experience because they were a really different kind of band. They were wonderful to us too, but they were not as gregarious as the Grateful Dead, but they were wonderful. They were like a band with funk, you know, horns, jazz. They did their own mixture of everything, and a really energetic mix of it all. If you've never heard them, and they're back together, so you know, not everybody's the same, but they're back together. I'd say go see them. But they were just as special. Their guitar player then was a guy named Terry Haggerty. And he is a guitar legend the world over, and he really still is. And he's not in the band anymore, but what an amazing guitar player. It was one of the it was amazing talented Bill Champlin, who went on to be in Chicago. So since the shows, if you saw the posters, there were $3 a piece. Now, yes, that's awfully cheap, but to go to Fillmore was $3.75. So that's how much things cost in those days. So at the end of, we got paid at the second night on both shows, and we got paid in $1 bills. And so we made about $1,000 for each night. So I had this big, I was the one who was on the contract, so I got this big wad of like $1 bills, literally. I mean, I had to ask for a bag, and I don't know why they didn't think of giving me that the second time I brought a bag. But all those $1 bills were put into a bag, and at the end of the night, we just went out onto one of our cars, you know, like you do cars, one for you, one for me, and we got our money. So it was kind of fun being paid in cash, by the way, especially if the motor might shut down in 2 weeks or something. So we were actually booked for several other shows, but like I said, the Dream Bowl would come to a close. And nothing's ever going to replace the magic rooted in the time of the long Napa venue. The Dream Bowl certainly fulfilled many, many dreams. It was properly titled, certainly mine. I've been fortunate to have continued to be in wonderful bands and even get to the point, like I mentioned, Bottle Rock, but many other venues around the Bay Area. Locally, the Blue Note, the venerated venues around the Bay Area. The Civic Center, Ashkenaz of Berkeley, the Last Day Saloon, New George's, and even the Napa Valley Opera House. And it was a lot of fun for 50 years. It still is fun. So now the county has begun a new chapter with the advent of the Blue Note, Bottle Rock, Napa Valley, Jam Cellars, Ballroom, and Feast It Forward, and it's multiple venues. Jam Cellars, Tasting Room, huge summer concerts that are going on. The gala at the Ruins, which is down in Mary Creek Canyon, visit the old cement works. What a magical place to play in, by the way. Live in the Vineyards, the Uptown Theater, Festival Napa Valley, many, many community events up and down the valley. Napa has become a major Bay Area destination where the very best groups come, new and venerated acts can be seen year-round. And so it's a real different place. And both of the bands that I am in currently, Soda Canyon and my longtime band Cosmos Percussion Ensemble, we performed at almost every one of those things and those venues throughout the Bay Area and beyond. And I hope that you will come out and see us sometime. We have a lot of other things that are coming up too, but one that's free is we'll be at St. Helena's inaugural Porch Fest, which is going to be September 28th. So thank you for being interested in the Dream Bowl. And thank you, Michael, for including me in your book. And I will say for those of you who are thinking about maybe reading this book or buying this book, it is a really well-written book. It's amazing. He's a really good author. Thank you.